All right, good evening, everyone. We have visitors, so virtually and in person from all sorts of different places. I see from Stanford, from Washington Heights, from general parts of Connecticut, Allentown, a few in Allentown as well, and then Rabbi Grossman, right? Visiting from Sayek, New Jersey. All right, came in for Crayola, stayed for the Torah. We should get a line like that. Come for Crayola, stay for the Torah. Can you write that one down before we forget? We're gonna just see Jody as chairing membership. We need like all these good lines, you know. What was that old one? Like close enough to your parents, far enough away from your in-laws, or something? Was that the? I think that was the original. All right, welcome, guys. All right, so there's a few hanging around somewhere. I have to give the same disclaimer every time that the source sheet is just extra credit points. So if you don't like looking at Hebrew words, that's okay. You could ignore it. So let's summarize, and then hopefully we should be wrapping up this sheet tonight. So for the past 2 weeks, we were talking about issues related to Shaimos, to Geniza, and to erasing the name of God. Last year, we had a very interesting dilemma. It's a very sad dilemma when you really think about it, but it's an interesting dilemma as well about giving tefillin to someone who's in a hospital that will be forced to incinerate it upon his discharge, or one way or the other. So that's what we dealt with last time. That's a classic. Now, first, what we're going to do is those who want to follow along on page 5, we're just going to look at a little bit of the reception. Every year we do. Even though, of course, I'm a big fan of Ramosha Feinstein, and as many people are, it's important to see what the responses were. Partially because intellectual honesty, you want the full breadth of opinions, and also sometimes we could appreciate Ramosha better when we understand him in contrast, and as a reference point, seeing what others held. So looking at source number 10, Osiyud over here on page 5, there's a sefer called Psichas HaIgros. We've referenced it before, Rabbi Yonas and Roseman. It is fantastic. One cannot learn Igros Moshe without it because he tells you 99.9% of everyone who agreed or disagreed, who's noteworthy. Now, I could disagree with where Moshe Fine says. I could get on Facebook and write an angry post about a tshuva I didn't like, but that doesn't mean anything. That's not going to make it into the book because my angry Facebook post doesn't count, even though a lot of angry people on Facebook seem to think that their posts do count about that. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, God bless you that you don't see these things. So he has all the important sources that agree or disagree. Some of them I'm not even familiar with. So one of them is this tshuva pas sadcha, and I see more. Every time I tell myself I have to remember to automatically let people get in the meeting. Oh, it did work. Okay. So in this tshuva, he takes issue with the following. If you remember, Rav Moshe said that you can delete a recording that has. So first he said, are you allowed to record Hashem's name onto a tape recorder? He said, yes, you can do that. Now, am I allowed to delete it? Can I overwrite it afterwards? He said, yes, as well. Now, what was the reason that one is allowed to play a recording in which it says Hashem's name? Remember that this is just the example that comes to mind for me. We have the Prince of Egypt movie, and then they get to the parting of the sea, and they begin to actually sing psukim from Az Yashir, and Hashem's name is actually invoked. So I felt kind of uncomfortable about that. So Moshe Feinstein says, as long as the environment is a clean environment, you're not watching it in the bathroom, so then it's okay because the prohibition of invoking God's name needlessly is only incumbent upon human beings, not upon eitzim va'avanim, upon wood and stones and inanimate objects. So the Tshuvas Pasadcha argues, Ubavade linyan hader yiras Hashem yisparach, amrinan mali mashmiya bepem mali mashmiya de kli. What's the difference? What's the reason I'm not allowed to needlessly invoke God's name? What's the reason? Anyone know? Right, and just like if you were to give like Tameh HaMitzvos right now, right? What's the rationale? What's so bad about that? It would cheapen it. Very good, right? Things that are more exclusive are, considered to be a higher class. So this is like I always wonder myself, like, why is it only like like wealthy people? Sorry, I apologize if I'm stereotyping too much. But like, oh, like it seems that people who are wealthier tend to like doing golf and skiing, and then I realized, oh, because there's actually like you need to be able to afford the equipment for golf and for skiing. So there's like a certain like baseline amount of finances that one requires to be able to participate in certain things. So then they become higher class things because only certain people are able to engage in them from a certain socioeconomic level. So similar idea, availability basically cheapens things. So if I just, and this is, by the way, Rambam says, why is it that I have to go to the mikvah before going to the Temple Mount, before going to the Beis HaMikdash? So the reason is that you shouldn't be able to just, waltz right into the Beis HaMikdash. Sometimes people like seminary students, yeshiva students, like, oh, I'll meet you at the kotel. But the kotel is supposed to be something that's sacrosanct, that's supposed to be holy. So the idea is that the lack of availability makes things naturally more precious, right? Just basic economics at work. So what's the difference whether I'm doing it or whether I'm playing it on a device? If I'm playing it on a device, that's still a breach of kavod, of honor for God, that I'm just playing a movie in which Hashem's name is being said, right? It cheapens it essentially. So that's his argument against Moshe Feinstein. Nonetheless, there are many instances in which we will notice that Chacham Ovadia Yosef will debate Rav Moshe Feinstein. Now, just a little bit of a background for not familiar, kind of like what Rav Moshe Feinstein is to the Ashkenazic and certainly the American Ashkenazic world in the mid to late 20th century, is essentially what Chacham Ovadia Yosef was to the Israeli Sephardic world. I am far from an expert in him, but just kind of to know a little bit about Rav Ovadia Yosef. Before he came onto the scene, the Ben Ish Chai was kind of like a predominant Sephardic figure from Iraq. And then he kind of made a name or disrepute for himself when he would take on the Ben Ish Chai. But I think what Chacham Ovadia Yosef tried to do was he tried to create a pan-Sephardic identity in which he wanted to create Sephardic Psak Halacha, which is a little bit controversial because many times in America, because we're predominantly an Ashkenazic country, so if a shul's big enough, then maybe they'll have a Sephardic minyan, or it'll be a Sephardic shul. But a Sephardic shul usually is you'll have like Moroccans, you'll have Persians, you'll have Syrian, or I don't know, put them all, and they're all just kind of put in the same bucket. But many of them will detest that because each and every one of them has their unique customs. So you can't just put them all in the same bucket together. But that was something that Chacham Ovadia did. But anyway, so there are many times that Chacham Ovadia Yosef, like many major 20th century poskim, did not see eye to eye with Moshe Feinstein, which we'll see in a moment. On this issue, he actually defends Rav Moshe. If we look on page number 5, in the bold, he quotes the Tshuvas Pasadcha, which I don't know what Rav Yonason Rosen's research methods were, but I wouldn't be surprised if he saw this tshuva from Chacham Ovadia, saw that he cites the Tshuvas Pasadcha, and then kind of worked his way. That's how we do. I mean, that's how, in academia also, you look at a research paper, you see the references over there, then you look up the references, and then that leads you to more references, and you follow the paper trail. So it's a similar idea. Or he had a seder in Tshuvas Pasadcha. Maybe just like, casually reading through all of it. Who knows? So Hifrazal Mida Lahachmer Rizah. He's like, come on, he's going crazy on Ramosha over here. But Leis Dochashlaha. You don't need to worry about this guy. Afilu Rabbanim v'Chasidim. Even if you're very pious, even if you're a rabbi, you got nothing to worry about over here. Upuk Chazi Mayoma Davar. Go see what everyone does. V'anach Lahem Li Yisrael. And if the Jewish people are doing it, let them have fun. Which he just invoked a bunch of halachic principles in a row over there. Puchazi Mayamadavar is if we don't know what the halachic practice is, well, why don't we go see what the halachic practice is? Now this only works, you could only have a minhag if the minhag is backed up by some halachic source. Meaning if the minhag is basically like, oh, we all hold that, I don't know, just actually, I was going to give an example that we drink stam yenam, that we drink wine without hashgacha on it, but there actually is a tshuva of the Ramah that he was noticing in Europe that a lot of Jews were drinking basically, like non-kosher wine, and he has a whole tshuva where he's like, well, this is wrong. Don't think otherwise. But if I don't manage to defend this practice in some way, then you're going to have countless Jews who are disqualified from being witnesses. I mean, think about the implications of this. There's questions about, can they render testimony in a Beis Din? This could also potentially, depending on your opinion, pose questions of, the witnesses under the chuppah. Certainly in marital laws they need to be keeping, but you want to make sure that they're keeping halacha in general. So what's the issue? Anyone know why witnesses under the chuppah are particularly unique compared to other witnesses in Jewish law? So what's the purpose of a witness, right? Let's say, Mayor, I borrow $100 from you. So if witnesses did not see it happen, do I still owe you $100?
On the assumption that there's no contract, then it's just your word against mine.
Right. But like, if, in principle, in Hashem's eyes, do I owe you $100? Yeah, I borrowed 100. Yeah. So here's the thing, though. Let's say a man goes over to a woman, right? He gives her a ring and he says, "Harayat mekudeshes lipetava so kidas Moshe b'Yisrael." I want to, betroth you with this ring over here. My wife did not give me this under the chuppah, by the way. This was given to me later on. The issue, by the way, is because what happens with the kiddushin is when the ring is given to the woman, she gives herself to the man. That's the exchange. So the issue is that other than the ideological issues of egalitarianism, but if the man gives her a ring and she gives him a ring back, so then that actually poses questions on the kiddushin, because then you're just swapping ring for ring. Guess what, guys? We're gonna get to that in a future Igros Moshe shir. These are all everything is addressed in the Igros Moshe. Everything's addressed in the Igros Moshe. So why did I bring that up? So right, usually witnesses are only brought in post facto, right? Let's say you and I disagree over, did I actually borrow $100 from me? Maybe it was $50. We need witnesses to corroborate what happened. But with a marriage, if a man and a woman just decide they want to get married and there's no two witnesses, there's no chalos kiddushin. The marriage is not actually effectuated. No marriage took place. This is different than other kinds of witnesses. So here's the thing. That's why, I've been to weddings where people will say, "Oh, I'll just get like my two buddies over here. They'll serve as the witnesses." Now, the two buddies might be really great, but actually many people, and I try to advise on the rare occasion that I'll teach chasanim, I say, it doesn't need to be me, but whoever are your two witnesses under the chuppah, that's more important in certain ways than the Masad or Kiddushin. The Masad or Kiddushin, the officiating rabbi, it's not like in Christianity where if there's no priest, then there's no wedding. The rabbi is Mesader Kiddushin. He is officiating it. He's organizing it. Now, he's making sure everything's done properly. So, chances are you have somebody and he's just like following the madrich, which is the rabbi's manual, and he's reading things carefully. Okay, there might be some mess ups on the ksuba or whatever, but that could always be rectified later on if needed. But if your witnesses aren't good, and then you run into issues. Now you're going to say, wait a minute. I know I'm really going off track over here, but once I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Wait a minute. Aren't there like a lot of witnesses at the wedding? There's like people in the audience. If those two aren't good, what about the rest of the guys? Anyone know what's the issue with that?
No. You should have a wedding and they call you.
So it's kosher. Don't worry.
Oh, thank you.
Maybe the other guy.
The point is those eight are the ones that they check the ring isn't shabbat fruta,
right?
Things like that. So everybody else, I also attend weddings. You don't have the same. You aren't asked the question. You don't answer. You may not even see all of what goes on. It's usually very crowded under the hood.
Right, and this actually raises an interesting question, because if the woman is still wearing the veil, there's a discussion in the Pischei Tshuva about this. If she's wearing the veil, and if it's like one of those like thick Hasidic ones, so then the issue is that the witnesses don't know which, right? It's like Rachel and Leah. They don't know who's under there. So some even like in those circles, I think maybe they'll lift it for a moment or something. But there's a whole discussion about the efficacy of the witnesses. Are they testifying that's that woman, or do we know it's the woman? They're just testifying that there was a kiddushin that took place. So,
Rabbi, can a woman be a Masad or Kiddushin?
So, thank you, Toby. This is being asked by our good friend Toby. You didn't ask if we're not going to talk about women for presidents, right?
But you just said that a Masad or Kiddushin is really just someone who organizes. So can a woman be an organizer?
Good. So Toby asks, can a woman be misaderis kiddushin, or they would say misaderid probably, or something like that.
Whatever you
But
want.
the answer is me'ikar hadin, strict letter of the law as far as kiddushin is concerned. The answer would be yes, with a quick asterisk. Here's where the asterisk comes in. Rav Moshe Feinstein had a debate with Rav Yosef Eliohankin, which I'm going to give away the whole shir right now. I can't do this. So yeah, otherwise I'm knocking off another shir from our agenda. But basically, there's a question about civil marriage, and there's a question about a reform marriage. Now, if anyone got married with a reform rabbi, close your ears over here. So shut your ears for a moment. So Rav Moshe argued. Well, okay, Rav Yosef Eliohankin argued. Look, the reform rabbi is no worse than having no rabbi. And the point is that they got married. They both expressed their intent. He gave a ring to her. They're both living under the same roof. So that's the consummation of the marriage. That's the nisuin. So they're married. Rav Moshe Feinstein says actually, potentially, the reform marriage could be worse than the civil one in certain ways, because when someone is civil marriage, there's no particular kavana for a religious context. But when someone gets married, let's just give an example. For him, let's say someone gets married in a Hindu ceremony. So the two people getting married say, we want to be married within the context of this particular religious tradition of Hinduism. So that wouldn't count for a Jewish marriage. In fact, it's not just simply that they don't have kavana to get married Jewish, it's that they have anti-kavana. Their kavana is we specifically want to be married in the Hindu tradition. All right? So now, this is not politically correct, but this is just how halacha works. So the reform movement, I'm not saying, this is not me giving opinions. In principle, they reject the binding nature of halacha.
Well, but wait, but what if the witnesses are good? What if the witnesses are good?
You're giving away the whole shir, Toby. So that's the debate, right? If there's two kosher witnesses, but Moshe says if it's yeah, right. Okay, it's good. So we have all these different things over here, and then Rav Asher Weiss has a truth on this as well. But basically, right. So the question is, there's two things. One is, if you have the reform rabbi officiating, it casts doubt on how good your witnesses are. Meaning, if the rabbi officiating isn't observing halacha, then it's a good chance that the witnesses being chosen probably aren't observing halacha either. And you're also assuming that there were two men who were chosen, so that's not a given either. But even if you do have kosher witnesses somehow, and it's a reform rabbi officiating, but then it's like for him, it's basically like Hinduism. It's that, again, it's not a PC thing to say. Like some people, he has a tshuva where he says that people tend to think that, Orthodox, Reform, they're just different flavors. It's like Nusach Ashkenaz and Nusach Sfard. He says, but no, they're fundamentally different because our religion is all predicated on the observance of halacha. Halacha is the core basis that binds all of Judaism together. So if you have someone come along and say, I'm Jewish, but I don't believe in halacha, I mean, the person might be Jewish or their mother was Jewish, but they're not observing Judaism anymore. So you've taken away, it's like imagine you have a car. This just came to my head, so it's not the best model. You have a car, and then you take out the engine. So you have a nice frame and everything. It looks nice and all on the outside. The ceremony will go well, but you've taken out the core of it that actually makes it function. So I don't know. That literally came to my mind on the spot. Take it or leave it. So that's his point, though. You're having anti-kavana. I realize that we're half into the shir, and I just gave the wrong shir. We'll take a question, then we're going to move forward on the source sheet. Yeah, David.
What puzzles me about this is, so we say Kedas Moshe B'Yisrael. So what does that mean? That this is a Jewish marriage? Does it mean that it's a Jewish ceremony, or that we intend to live our lives as a Jewish married couple? What does it mean for it to be a Kedas Moshe B'Yisrael that the Reform wedding does not capture?
Right. Very good.
Also, what if a not religious couple gets married with an Orthodox ceremony, and they don't intend to be from the rest of their lives, but now she's forbidden to other men by Jewish law, Kedas Moshe B'Yisrael, even though they don't intend to live like that. They don't intend to have a kosher marriage.
Excellent question. It's a great question. So for Moshe's purposes, it's that they're intending to go with the proper halakhic definition of what marriage is called, even if they don't understand right? You don't understand all like the thumb dips and the lumdis about what's the difference between the Edom you have under the chuppah versus the Edom that you would have in Dinei Mamnus. So like even if they don't understand, like the point is like they are basically outsourcing their das, their understanding to the rabbi, saying, Rabbi, whatever religion and beliefs you sign on to, we want to be married under that framework. So now just so you understand, all virtually, I mean, any responsible Orthodox rabbi, there's basically a big ethical question, which is I was talking to one of my friends, and it was a rabbi in New York, and he said he got asked to kind of marry off this couple that he has nothing to do with, and they're not observant. So he said, well, can I marry them if I know that they're not going to be observing Taharas HaMishpacha? She's not going to be going to mikveh for anything. So usually what we do is that we try to do chassan and kala classes. We try our best to give what are the essentials. We try to be very tactful about it, and just make sure that they know the general idea that there's this thing called nida, and then you're supposed to go to the mikvah, and there's a nice app you can use to track everything and all that kind of stuff. It's much easier teaching the men than it is teaching the women. You could it's much easier. You streamline it a lot more. So yeah, you cover like 2-3 sessions. So anyway, we don't know if they're going to keep it, but we did our part in making sure that they're educated and have the framework for doing it. But whether they go ahead and keep the halachos or not does not impact the legitimacy of the marriage. Now, this is an interesting question. Please don't ask any questions because there's a whole other shiur about Igros, about what happens if someone converts and then they don't observe halacha 2 seconds later. Does that mean that the conversion was a sham? A whole shiur. It'll probably be a 3-part shiur. We will get to it. But one last thing, because when we get to the actual civil marriage class, so I kind of gave away the essentials. Even though a lot of people, particularly those who are very much very much level the interdenominational kumbaya stuff, they didn't like the fact that Ramosha was delegitimizing the non-orthodox, and then the conservative ones get a little bit questionable also, but still in reform. So even though he was delegitimizing non-orthodox marriages, what he did actually was he saved a lot of potential mamzerim, a lot, right? Because children who are going to be born out of adulterous wedlock, because I don't have a statistic, but I think it's probably good anecdotal evidence that chances are people who get married Orthodox are more likely to get divorced under halachic auspices, and there are probably more people who go married under Reform auspices who are less likely to go through a get and more likely to do maybe a civil divorce. So what happens is that you have this couple that if we say they're married, then they get civilly divorced. And then what happens is that they're actually halachically still married. She goes and marries a new guy, has children with him, and the children are mamzerim. Then they decide, I'd like to become frum one day. And guess what? Now they cannot marry anybody, and it's very sad. So he actually saved a lot of potential mamzerim. That guy was trying to get in. Oh, okay. Yeah.
That something that people realize, right? What happens when the guy, the gentleman will not get a get, but he then goes off and gets married?
Yeah, so he's doing the wrong thing, but it's not considered adultery from a technical halachic standpoint, because men fundamentally and halacha are able to have multiple wives. Polygamy on baseline halacha is permissible. It was only a later Chayrim D'Rabbeinu Gershom that forbade polygamy. I think I don't know if it's still true, but like some places in the Middle East, I think at least until recently, there were some Sephardim who, they weren't under that ban, was Ashkenazic in nature, so they were still practicing polygamy.
I think 68 was outlawed in Israel.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I don't think people are coming in, but they're from Igros.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, okay, well, we got to go back to our feature presentation. So I feel bad. I'm going to upload this to YU Torah, and then everyone's going to be like, wait, what recording am I listening to? Yeah. Yeah.
Back in the day, oaths were very important. And if you gave your word, they didn't have a lot of things where you could write things down or anything else. In the Tanakh, that people are making oaths.
Yeah.
LegalZoom.com. So, that's what I'm trying to say. That's what it's important about. Facing God. Pretty good.
And maybe the shame is that we don't feel that level of gravity anymore. Yeah, that's the shame about it. All right, back to our feature presentation. Okay, we're going to go to page 6 now. Osia Gimel. Just to wrap up the section over here. Rishumi Aaron is Rav Aaron Felder. Rav Aaron Felder was one of the well-known, or if you don't know, now you know, students of Rav Moshe Feinstein. So in his notes on his interactions with Rav Moshe Feinstein, he says, is in the bold, he asked him about, can I throw out newspapers that have Divrei Torah in it? So Amarli, he responded to me, Shakodim Kol, first of all, Yesh Leva'er im harayonos ha'elu shekol Rav Ploni. We first have to investigate if the random musings of every random rabbi, hey, begeder Divrei Torah hatunim geniza, if they actually constitute Divrei Torah that require burial in the first place. Which I was like, ooh, that was harsh. I felt that it's like a gut punch when I heard that one, right? So, it's like there's like a lot of rabbis who very quickly, they see like there's a political statement or something, and they'll sign their name onto it and they feel good because they can write Rabbi so-and-so. I signed on to, whatever political thing, but how often are they like actually writing Torah scholarship? So I was telling one of my friends who's a little bit more inclined toward doing these things than I am, is that I said, for every one of these letters you sign on to, there should be at least like 5 to 10 more scholarly articles that you write. Because I realized when I was in Smicha, I felt good. Oh, I could write like an op-ed in the forward or whatever. And then I realized oh, wait, if I'm learning Torah and that's my expertise, maybe I should be writing stuff with Torah content. I feel like that's what we should be doing most of the time. And then if there's something, in the public sphere that we really need to get into, we do. But, for others, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, God bless you all. You should, it's better that way. Okay. And then just to tag on to this in Igros Moshe, this Osya Daled, he says, this is a tshuva just about speaking in between aliyos during laning. So here's the thing. If you don't know, now you know, it's forbidden to talk during laning. And even between aliyos, it's not so clear if one is able to just have, empty conversation. Even that, it might have to be, related to what's going on, or maybe related to Torah. So the question is, we had this question all the time when I was in Connecticut. Let's see, we got Toby on over there. So you remember, we had 4 minyanim by the time I left over there. So I was on a typical Shabbos morning. So the senior rabbi was at the 9 a.m. and the 9 a.m. was, very official. And if a rabbi left for 0.5 seconds, then they were afraid the whole place would implode, right? So I had the fun job, which was going to the 7 o'clock davening and then getting to give it to Torah also at the 8 o'clock, and then at the Sephardic minyan, and if I wasn't giving the 10:30 shir on Shabbos morning. So I made my entire hakafa. I had a full circuit. It was just the same Dvar Torah every single time. So the question was, I'd show up at the Sephardic minyan and they were already middle of laning. So do I have to come back later, or could I speak in between aliyos? So Ramosha says, maybe you could for Dvar Torah, but ukol shekain shevadai omer kederach drashos harabanim hatzeirim sheikar shalhem lo shaychi leTorah klal she'aser. But however, the kind of drushos I'm seeing that the young rabbis are giving these days, that the main part of the drush has nothing to do with Torah at all, that cannot be done between aliyos, right? You ever one of the best pieces of mussar I got?
That was never you, Rabbi.
I appreciate that, Toby. One of my first drusha I gave when I was an intern at Young Israel of Plainview on Long Island. We were just talking about Long Island before. So I got up there. It was like a 10 minutes or so. I opened up. I had a lot of jokes. People laughed. Maybe they were just being very gracious. And I had a perfunctory Dvar Torah that I tied in. And then I sit down, and Rabbi Eli Weissman, who is my mentor, he turns to me and, he gives some, compliments. And then he says, but just as a pointer, next time there should be more Torah content in there. And I was like, you're right. It's called a Dvar Torah. You ever talk to college kids? I've talked to them I'm at the Hillel this Shabbat, and they asked me to give the Dvar, not the Dvar Torah, the Dvar. Now I know it's cool to say things in a brief fashion, but I was like, you see, it's the Dvar, but where's the Torah? So sometimes I've heard many quote Divrei Torah that are just Dvar without the Torah. Sometimes because people expect that drushos are supposed to be inspirational. So what they don't get is Torah can be inspirational, but not everything inspirational is Torah. So like reading, you could read something. I'm going to give you all the good lines that I've learned already. I forgot who this was. I think his name was Rabbi Micha Berger, perhaps. He had a pithy, he's I never met him, but. Oh, okay, good. So tell me, he posted one time. I saw this line. He said, I might be botching this. The goal of self-help literature is to help you become the best person you want to be. The purpose of Musar literature is to help you become the best person Hashem wants you to be. I was like, so I mean, like, and you're saying like the Torah could have self-help advice. I mean, we read the narratives in the Torah, and like clearly there are lessons for our life. That I hope so. But to kind of distill and relegate the Torah to self-help literature is a shame, because I mean, frankly, I don't know what you're doing with all the Sefer Vayikra at that rate. Like lots of other parts. You have to be a very good darshan then. But speaking of getting back to the Torah, actually, so now for our actual topic that hopefully I'll be able to cover in 10 minutes or so. Wow, I don't even know what I really like. I'm going to upload this to YU Torah later tonight, and I don't even know what I'm calling the shir at this point. But the point is that we've learned Torah. That's the point. Just say Torah on there. Miscellaneous Torah. Okay, intellectual property. Bottom right column, page 6. So let me summarize the tshuva. I'll read some snippets from it. The question is, and again, this is still back in the age of tape recorders, right? Remember we talked about record players last week, so now we're talking about tape recorders. We're making our way into the future slowly but surely. Don't call me Shirley. So vaday aser ki inyan shavkat. So what's going on over here? The question is, if you just have to appreciate the shaila that's being asked is already beautiful. That the question is, there's a rabbi who gave a shir, and it's recorded on a tape. And the question is, do I need permission from him to go ahead and record and to burn? Is burn the copy? Burn his CDs, right? And copy the contents of that tape onto other tapes. So that's the question. Like, first of all, just that these are the questions that we're asking. Isn't that beautiful? Like, how do I proliferate more Torah? So he says that this could constitute gezel potentially, actual theft, if you're taking his physical tape that he owns without his permission and making copies of it. And he says, Leika mishum midas sedom. This would not constitute, there's something called kofin al midas sedom. That if someone, basically what's sedom? Sedom, they didn't like to share, even if there was no loss. So there's a concept that, if I have something and someone could benefit from me and I'm not gonna lose out at all, then that's called midas sedom if I'm not willing to help someone else and no cost to me. It's a huge sugya in Bava Kama called Zen Nehane V'Zelo Chaser, about instances where Shimon benefits and Reuven doesn't lose. There's a Tosfos there. Put that on the side. Just an interesting concept to know. Now, Keveshu Chefso, because Rabbi Ploni Almoni is the owner of the tape. So just like any object cannot be taken without permission. And then he says, however, going to the next column, that the avshlo shaykh iser gezel. And now let's say I'm not actually borrowing. I'm not stealing his tape from him. But let's just say I take a recording device and I put it in front of him. Like you'll see. I remember when I was in yeshiva. So everybody would have these little recorder devices they put in front of the Rebbe when he was giving his shir, and then that way they could listen to it and then do chazar afterwards. So I think there was one of these on Ura or something. They had this funny video where every day the students would come, and then eventually he noticed that there were no students in shir because there was a million recorders around him. So then one day he comes in with his device, puts it down and plays the recording, and it leaves, and then you just see the recorder playing to all the other devices that are in there soaking it in. So that was a very clever one. So here he says, even though this is not called gezel, it's not theft because you're not taking tangible property from somebody. Ika al kolpanim iser milavar al daito. There's still a general prohibition of using something against somebody's express wishes. He doesn't exactly define precisely what that is and what the parameters are, but it wouldn't be actual theft. This is a big question. Trust me, it's not only Moshe Feinstein who deals with this question. It's a big question over intellectual property in general, even before technology really advanced. Just think about printing press kind of questions, and then going ahead and taking the text from someone else and then reprinting it. There was not exactly an intellectual property issue, but this was the question the Ramah dealt with the Rambam's Mishnah Torah being reprinted by other publishers. It's not exactly intellectual property issues, but just think about it. Copyright. Thank you. So that, but like copyright essentially plays into the intellectual property question. Now here's the thing though. Moshe Feinstein in the introduction to Igros Moshe, when he justifies, he writes a justification. Why, who am I to write a whole, publish all my tshuvos? But he says, like Rabbi Akiva Eger in his generation, that if I'm capable, he was an unav, he had humility, but he knew who he was. If someone asks you a question and here's the key part, if one is qualified, it's like Lahora, to actually paskin, one is forbidden to turn away the shua. One has an obligation to answer the shaila if they know how to answer it. So he says, okay, I'm obligated to answer. So the question is, if one is obligated to share Torah, what right does this rabbi have to withhold his shiurim if people want to proliferate it? So why? So I definitely relate to this a lot. Yesh harbi sheinu roy lefarsin. There are many that are not worthy, or perhaps not better not to put out there. Bishun sheim limsor some lukuli alma. Like imagine I give this shiur, and then we talked about reform marriage, and then I think we dealt with it in a very level and respectful manner. But then someone listens to it, and then they show it to our friends at the Reform Synagogue, or they show it to the Federation, and then like someone just gets a snippet, and then there's a headline in the next Hakol, where it says Rabbi Kurt speaks out against reform people at shul, and then there's a civil war, right? Like people could, I'm not afraid someone's going to go on Why You Turn that happens, but if not, then please listen to this part of the recording, and that way you.
He knew all about YouTube and the internet.
Yeah, exactly. He knew what's going to happen. I mean, now in the social media age.
Also, if the rabbi is giving these speeches and everything, then, they should ask permission so that they can record it in the first place. And then you need permission to disseminate it. It's also a question of.
Right. Yeah, very good. So he says that, right? Because he says this, again, I'm skipping over parts of the tshuva, but he says, right, that he can make a revach, he can make profit off it. You're right. Now, the assumption is that, the people coming to the shiur could listen in, but, just to quote our Toby, our good friend, Refershel Schechter, what would happen was, he would be giving a shiur. It was 99.999% Torah content. And then he made one flipping comment or something. And then the next thing you know, somehow it got leaked out to the forward. And then the forward had this article, Herschel Schachter says that people of whatever ethnic descent are terrible. And then whatever. And then, and then that's a whole cleanup mess. And I think at a certain point, the shiur assistant for Schachter Shiurim would kind of pre-delete certain parts of the shiurim before uploading them to Why You Torah. Because apparently there are some people who just had this twisted desire not to listen to all the Torah content of Schachter Shiurim, but just to try to find those pull quotes that they could put in the JTA or something. I don't know how else they got leaked out there. Anyway, right? You know what I'm talking about? Okay, we won't go there. So he says there are many things that Yeshe Morinkain. There are ideas we can share in a shiur that are not meant to be paskin by, that shouldn't be aren't meant for the public. Or maybe the rabbi is just very self-conscious, or maybe he's very humble and says, what, if it's possible. I mean, I'll be honest with myself. We quoted a lot of halachos during this year. It's possible I misspoke on something. So then, it's one thing if I misspeak in front of my very esteemed audience over here, because you're all smart and you'll realize I made a mistake. But if it gets out there for the broader audience, who knows, who might listen and walk away with the wrong impression. And then I'll forget to put an asterisk on that shiur. And then that person's going to go by the wrong halach. I should say over here, by the way, most of what we're doing here is not for halacha l'maisa purposes. But you can always, I guess for all of you guys, I guess it is because this is the shul. But anyone who's listening on, ask you, consult your local Orthodox senior rabbi. That was for you, Toby. Anyway, that's the main tshuva over there. Now, a few quick points. Oz Tezayin over here, Sefer Mesoros Moshe, Rabbi Mordechai Tendler, his grandson, who was the shamash at the end of his life. Rav Moshe Feinstein noticed. I'll read for you. This is the last source on page 6. V'kol Rosh Hashanah is takarbin b'harbi mechtavim shnesu b'meshach Hashem k'dei las b'hem seder. Rabbi Moshe was before Rosh Hashanah was like looking over a lot of documents, putting things together. Umatzah michtav echad mechaveres bituach achas beretz Yisrael shebiksha rishus lahanfis hatshuva shekasar beinu orus asiyas bituach. There was an insurance company. We're going to get to Moshe on insurance, God willing, in a future shir. So I'm just giving you a lot of teasers over here. So the insurance company wanted to quote what Rav Moshe had to say about insurance in one of their letters. So V'amar li Rabbeinu, Rav Moshe responded to me. He said, it's not clear to me that I have permission to withhold them from publishing that. Because I published my work, so that way people will learn it and quote it. If they want to actually quote my tshuva, then hey, go ahead. That's why I published it. I wasn't, you're not publishing most svarim. You don't turn much of a profit on them. So he's like, I'm putting it out there that way people could learn it. Now we should point out he didn't like people writing in one-liner summaries of his chuvos, because then you lose all the nuances and considerations, and then you'll extrapolate it to other situations that doesn't make sense to. But so I assume he would want the full context in there. And actually, just go to Os Yud Zayin over here. My friend Rabbi Aaron Buchler shared this with me. It's a chuvos called Or HaYetzira, which is found in a book called Sefer Zechuyos HaYotzrim. Literally an entire sefer dedicated to copyright in halacha. And the funny part is in that sefer, he's like quoting lots of stuff in there. So he has to actually explain how he's allowed to quote them. So he says, let's say there's a student, right? Rabbi Mordechai Tendler, Mesoros Moshe, Rabbi Aaron Felder, Rishumei Aaron. So who has rights to that information? Is it Rabbi Moshe Feinstein or is it Rabbi Aaron Felder and Rabbi Mordechai Tendler? So the answer is, the one who has ownership over the notes from the shir, he shall hakosef, o shall machon, v'lo shall ha'omer v'yorshav. It's from the note taker or the organization that's basically putting it together, not from the guy who gives the shir. So, if you're listening to these shirim and then you decide to, not that it's worth writing up, but if you were in theory to write up what we do over here, I wouldn't be the owner, you would be the owner. But please don't do that, because shortly thereafter, I try to write these up and then publish it with tradition. So they will be written up, God willing, soon. Speaking of Rishumei Aaron, here's a nice short one over here. Sefer Rishumei Aaron, Os Yud Ches, Misha Kana Sefer Rashai Salim. One can, right? He put the English is from him. Photocopy. See, don't say I never put English on sheets. As Dapin Letzerach Shimush Atzmi. If one wants, so you'll notice if you look in front of most Hebrew Sfarim. In fact, let me just see what it says over here. I wonder if actually what it says in the front of Igros Moshe. Not usually over here. Well, it says copyright 1959 by Rabbi M. Feinstein. But you'll also see in Hebrew. Let me pull out. I just have the Oz V'Hadar, so they probably were on top of doing that. You'll notice it says in the front matter somewhere. Nidfas Beretz Yisrael. I got it, but someone needs the address. I know who that is. Someone. All right. Usually it says something like Kol Azchiyos Shomros. Here it is. Kol Azchiyos Shomros L'Mamleches HaTorah Oz V'Hadar. Wow. Okay. They call themselves. I love how they quote them. They call themselves the kingship of Torah, Mamleches HaTorah. But it says Kol Azchiyos Shomros. A lot of Sfarim will say that in there. But if one wants to make a copyright for themselves, they're allowed to do that. And then what gets a little questionable is, so maybe for a private shir also arguably I think you can do it, but once you're doing it for a much more public publication, that's where it becomes more questionable. And then finally, let's just wrap up with a few more sources. Let's go to Mesoros Moshe. So here's a great example. I could bring it in for a show and tell. So if you want to learn Rav Moshe Feinstein on the Parsha, there's two main ways to do it. There's the Darash Moshe, which is his own writing. And then there's the Kol Ram, which is Rav Shlomo Fishelis, who's a relative of Rav Moshe Feinstein. They're based on a lot of Rav Moshe's Shal Shudas Divrei Torah, but they get taken from other places. A lot of the material overlaps with the themes in Darash Moshe. I guess This is what happens to all rabbis. Eventually, you start reiterating all your things. Eventually, it's you come back to the same points. So the question. So he says over here that Dodi Hagon Rav. Right. So I went to my uncle, and then he said, "Mishu Amar Dvar Torah Tzibor Ain't Shai Shishar Etzel Bailispo." If someone shares the Dvar Torah for the Tzibor, you don't have ownership over it. Now it's in the public sphere. And then Varak Yochel Leo Shnishalo Bailis Lagavi Masha of Sadro. Maybe there's a sense of having ownership over it in the sense that you put all the work in collating it together. And then last paragraph there. And it would seem that the children of Moshe Feinstein, Rav David and Rav Reuven, were not makbid either. That they were okay when Rav Avram Fishlus went ahead and wrote and put together his Svarim. So there you go, right over there. That's how else could these Svarim be written? And so this was, by the way, I think we'll conclude with this. So this was a big question for me because, God willing, I'm trying to move them along, but I have the Sefer on Rav Moshe Feinstein and Pirkei Avos that's supposed to be coming out once they finally finish typesetting it. So the style is that it's an anthology, it's a likud. So I am taking from a lot of other Svarim, and there's a lot of pull quotes in there. Some of them are longer than others. So the question, I felt a little uncomfortable, but then Baruch Hashem, I got a haskama from Rav Reuven Feinstein, which is the last source over there, photocopied onto the page. Sorry that it's in very small font, but essentially he actually. So let me read it for you. This is worthwhile. I'll skip all the pleasantries, and the middle paragraph is where it gets juicy. He writes, it's a great idea to go ahead and to publicize more of my father's Torah, the Hador Hazebov and Chadash, in a new way to the generation. So that way they'll continue to learn from his Torah and his deeds. But it's self-understood that there's a danger in doing this. Chada. So number one, that when you take pieces out of context, I tried to frame things properly. If you don't see the full tshuva, then you might misunderstand things just from a pull quote, right? That's what the media does all the time. They take very juicy lines out of an hour-long speech, then they put it on there in short sound bites, and then people rage about it on social media. So that's right. That's what happens. Lahavdil. The Yoser, kishadvarmim kvar b'chli shlishi, and since now that these are already, in a kli shlishi, a third vessel, which Ramesh holds a kli shlishi doesn't cook on Shabbos. We'll talk about that in the future. Shav shemin hastam in chushim mechaber l'shaker bekavana. Now, even though we don't think that an author would ever deliberately fabricate anything. Kvar made on isayon shekamat rov pamim yeshinuyim ramim bein b'masim bein b'halacha. Sometimes there are stories about my father that seem so out there that it's like they came out of nowhere. That's the term we use like at a Sheva Brachos. You want new faces there. It's like new faces have come here entirely. I don't know what they're talking about. The story never happened. When we get to the Chalav Stam Shir about milk, there's a story I saw Ramosha Sternbach and others say that they heard that Ramosha, he once accidentally drank Chalav Stam, and then he just couldn't stand it, so he wound up expelling it from himself. He wound right. So and then I saw in a sefer Baruch Sha'amar. I'm forgetting, is it Zax, I think, or I'm forgetting the name, but he's from Staten Island. So he writes that never actually happened. So there's but that's a story that you hear about Ramosh all the time, but many deny it ever happened. But it's a story in yeshivas they'll say all the time. So he says, but nonetheless, if you look at the next paragraph, he says, but from the little bit I've been able to analyze, that whether it's the books that you quoted directly from my father, or whether it be from others from that talk about my father, that you cited them word for word, verbatim, without changing the language, and that you put a citation there. So I felt very reassured when he wrote that, because he basically said, not only is it okay that you were quoting everything verbatim, but actually it's a good thing because then there's less information, there's less broken telephone along the way. So I don't share this to toot my own horn, even though I am a bit of a Balgaiva, but this part over here to me was like, this is like a good way to cap it off because there's actually, we're always asking, do I have permission to quote? Do I have permission to quote? But on the other hand, if we play around with the language sometimes, it's called being kone beshinoi. Then one tries to acquire something by changing it and making it their own, but then there's broken telephone and we could lose the original information. So I made sure when putting the book together, everything, the source is fully cited, and we actually worked on the typeset that I bolded every time it says Vizel Lashono, which is an open quote, and Akal Lashono, which is an end quote. I made sure it was in a bold typeface. That way it's very clear where my words end and someone else's words begin. That way, I only want to take credit. I don't want to take credit for their words. So, okay. Anyway, we'll end the share over here, my friends. And I will decide what we're going to do next week. I'll decide. I think we might do Zmanim. Who's interested? Because I've just been working on the shul calendar for the year. So I'm actually very excited to explain to everyone the reasoning behind some of the adjustments that you might notice. So maybe I should give the Zmanim shir just so.
Speaking of Zman, you want to adjust the Zman?
Oh, for our shir here? The thing is, so we're going to jump back to Shkia soon.
Okay,
So Minyan's actually going to jump back to the upper sixes. So meaning it'll soon be almost back to back with the shear again. So it pays to keep it just for a few more weeks. All right, stay tuned for an email. Let's talk about that. Okay, people will not. I might have something actually. That's a good idea because I'm going to be at the Powers wedding, God willing, on Sunday. So wish me luck. I'll say Hagoma when I get back. And then I'm getting back sometime Monday afternoon. So yeah, I probably won't be able to give this year. I'll probably just be crashing or something. So no shear next week, everybody. I'll try to get that on the bulletin, but mark your calendars. No shear. Thank you for thinking of that. And that gives me enough time to finish the Zmanim source sheet, which that'll be a juicy one as well. I don't like math, but I will make the Zmanim sugya fun. Okay, hold me to it.
Call me, Rabbi.
Right.
Call me. Call me.
Okay,
Thank you, and I
sure.
like
All right,
Call
have a
me.
good night, everyone.
Thank you so much.